Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first webinar of the third day of our very first Digital Transformation Week. So it's been a really great kind of week so far. On Monday, we published some exclusive material, all to do with digital strategy. So you can check out our articles, video and podcast all on that subject as well. Yesterday, we focused on some of the digital challenges that charities face. And today we are looking towards leadership and culture. So as I said, this is the first live webinar of our Digital Transformation Week, but there will also be one tomorrow morning that will focus on creating compelling digital experiences to inspire and engage your supporters. And that will come as part of our day on digital fundraising. Lastly, but certainly not least, we'll be finishing the week with content tailored for small charities. So let's crack on then. These past 2 years have been challenging, to say the least. The pandemic meant charity workers quickly had to adjust to remote working, meaning leadership teams were put in a situation they hadn't been in before. From ensuring operations continued to run smoothly to reaching beneficiaries in new ways, the charity landscape completely changed. And this had an impact on culture too, where once we could chat to each other easily face to face and maintain a boundary between our work and home lives, home very much came into the workspace and vice versa. Mental health became a bigger concern as a result of fears around the virus and the nature of isolation, but it wasn't all doom and gloom. This past 2 years has shown that we can be flexible and that we need to look inwards at the ways that we interact with each other within our teams. In this webinar today, our very own Head of Marketing, Chris Hall, will be providing some of his top tips and learnings for charity leaders to kick off with our Leadership and Culture Days. So I'll let Chris introduce himself more in a second, but first I do want to mention a few house rules. One thing to mention is that Chris and I are actually in the same room. So if ever you have been in a Zoom call where you're with a colleague in the same room, yes, we will be sort of bouncing around with the mute button. So just something to bear in mind there. We do also have closed captions available. Just hit the CC button and those should show up, but do let us know if you're having any issues and you can pop that in the chat. Speaking of the chat, it's there to be used, so feel free to let us know where you're joining in from, what organisation you're from, and also we do actually welcome you to provide any thoughts and learnings you might have for your peers as well who are attending this webinar today. So we'll have a live Q&A at the end, so any questions you might have, please just pop them in the Q&A function, and that helps me keep track of the ones coming in so that I can ask them to Chris after his session. But otherwise, that's all from me, and I'll hand over to Chris now, and see you later.
Thanks very much, Sasha. Hello, everybody. I hope you can all see my video. I have turned it on. I might just be getting loaded there a little bit. Thanks very much, Sasha. Lovely introduction, as always, and huge welcome to all of you to the Leadership and Culture Day of Digital Transformation Week. I hope you've all got your fill of plenty of content already from Digital Strategy Day on Monday and Digital Challenges Day yesterday. And you're looking forward to all the great stuff that's coming today and in the rest of the week as well. As Sasha mentioned, it is a bit of a unique webinar today. For the first time in probably 2 years, I'm doing it in front of a live audience. As in a live audience in the same room. I know you're all sat listening at home, albeit a live audience of one. It's still pretty daunting just to have someone sort of stare you down as you're presenting this stuff. So if it all goes wrong, that's why, but I'm sure it won't. A very quick, who am I for those of you who don't know me, and I promise I breeze through this quite quickly. I'm Chris Hall, as Sasha said, Head of Marketing here at Charity Digital. I've been here for 3 years and I oversee all things marketing, from our content through to our events and our overall platform growth as well. I've been in the sort of digital tech for good space now getting on for 10 years, but I've never really felt quite as home or rewarded as I ever have at CD or Charity Digital. Sorry, abbreviating it for you all there. On a personal note, I am a shameless Geordie. I'm an expectant father for the first time, so I'm very excited about that. And I do have a love for penguins, something that I'm hoping to pass on to my little girl as well. But that is enough about me. We're here to talk about digital culture. If you just pop the slide over, please, that'd be grand. As Sasha was sort of alluding to, you know, the necessary shift to digital caused by the pandemic has left a lot of us on that digital cliff edge. We're staring at the other side as we try to find that way across. The same's kind of happened to our organizational cultures as well, with just about every charity I know changing how we work overnight, and often for the better as well. Well, change by necessity is a really powerful thing. We actually need to try and fight the urge to go back to those previous ways of working, and instead try and capitalize on the shift and start embedding the digital cultures that we want in our organizations as we go forward. Every culture is unique. Every culture is unique to their own charity, but there are certain essentials that we conclude to put the digital at the heart of our organisations. And we've kind of took those essentials and boiled them down, pun intended, to 5 key ingredients that I'm going to walk you through today. So let's start at the very beginning, because it's often the best place to start. First one, culture is people first. And there's nothing more true than that. You know, we often believe that so much of digital is reliant on technology and processes, but in reality, any sort of digital transformation follows the good old, management 80-20 rule. Digital transformation is 80% people, 20% technology. Everyone from your donors and users to your board of trustees needs to be with you on your digital journey. And the success of digital initiatives are dependent on the support and buy-in of your internal and external stakeholders as well. That's why your digital culture also needs to be people first. A people-first culture can make or break an employee's trust, satisfaction, and engagement from one organisation to another. Happier employees work harder and smarter as well to achieve both their personal, departmental, and organisational goals overall. It's essential to think of culture as people-based. And in that sense, it's the salt and pepper, let's say, to our digital culture dish here. Every dish that you ever create, every meal always needs a bit of salt and pepper. And it's never quite the same without them. I've just got pictures of Gordon Ramsay shouting seasoning in my head as I go through that. And remember, also like salt, getting to the place you want the culture to be is likely to give you a bit of high blood pressure on the way as well. So important to remember that and give yourself a break as you're on these journeys as well. But I promise it will be worth it. Anyways, getting back on track and moving away from that terribly mushed together metaphor, the big takeaway and an obvious starting point here is that people are key to the success of any digital culture. And with that being said, and everything we go to talk on through from here on out will be with that in mind. So let's get cracking and have a look at the remaining ingredients. Next up is communication. So communication is key, and lack of it can derail any digital transformation strategy or digital culture just before it even gets started. Before beginning any culture change, it's really important to think how you will communicate your culture to the different stakeholders it involves. And here's a little bit more about that, for example. Your board of trustees needs statistics and data to understand how digital is affecting return on investment, productivity, and engagement. And they also need that to be able to give you valuable input to the decisions you need to be making as a leadership team and as an organization as well. As a leadership teams, we need to commit to culture shifts and change. The start with us, it starts top down. So we need to champion it within our own organizations and within our own teams as well. Driving the values that we create and regularly reviewing against them and evaluating against them as well. Managers need to feel involved in all the cultural changes as well. This heightens motivation and buy-in, two things that they'll then go on to spread within their teams as well. And employees need to feel secure in their role. You can do that by giving them as much information as possible as soon as possible. Be transparent, involve employees at every possible stage, and encourage questions as well. There's no such thing as a bad question. Essentially and ultimately, it's all about involvement. And making sure that you're offering the training, the upskilling, and upskilling when needed to give employees that confidence with digital and confidence that they have the support of the organization as you change and as you bring new things into the organization. And lastly, donors and users also need to feel that their needs are being met as well. This allows them to feel more confident with your organization. It may seem a strange one as we think of culture as a solely internal mechanism, but all of our goals, all of our strategies, everything we do internally as a charity should be to better what we serve our users or better how we interact with our donors. And that starts by fostering a culture that puts the needs of those audiences as a priority. Big challenge here is knowing your audience and using that to your advantage. Engaging your board is different to updating your employees. So you need to communicate the right message to the right audience at the right time, a lot like everything else when it comes to communication. You need an internal communication plan to ensure engagement with your culture at every level. And it's a good place to start as you're drawing up the ingredients. Big tip here is consider which stakeholder group needs what information and the best channels to deliver it to them. For example, your board might need a regular report, your staff might need face-to-face briefings, regular email, internet communications, and so on. Keeping everyone focused and with their eye on the next objective is imperative to foster that digital culture with true digital thinking at the heart of it and within your organization as well. And once you have an understanding of your comms, it's really time to start getting into the nitty-gritty of what you want, of how you want to shape your organization, what you really want that to look like. And the best way you can start doing that is by having a look at your organizational values. Excuse me. Every thriving organization, every thriving company, every thriving sort of charity culture has a clear set of core values that supports the organizational mission. Values are how we expect people to behave, and they essentially bring our why to life. They're our purpose. Values are not just words, but a guide on how people operate and what's expected of them. They should encourage positive behaviors and discourage anything that harms the working environment at the same time. They are the set of guiding beliefs upon which our organization is based. And above all, values help people function together as one single unit and help shape the way employees should behave as well. The core values of an organization impact both internal and external affairs, as I was mentioning earlier. They define not only how employees treat each other, but also the behavior expected towards service users, donors, partners, clients, the broader community of charity supports as well, everyone we interact with. And ultimately, values that we create are the service of our are created in service of our organizational mission. They define the desired behavior to accomplish the company's why, as I said. And once set, they should affect every aspect of our charities, from reward models, compensation, policies, all the way through to strategic decisions, engagement, public affairs, and so on. And it's not enough to sort of create our values and showcase them on a PowerPoint or stick them on a wall or in a marketing campaign. None of that will actually bring the core beliefs or the core values to life. Our values actually only make sense if they're practiced. Unfortunately, most companies that we see out there today have a real disconnect between proclaimed values and behavioral values. Just thinking out loud at the minute, Facebook springs to mind immediately. But what I'm saying here is that values are only truly helpful when they're expressed in everyday behavior. So with that being said, what are the benefits of values? Why should we have them? Well, when put into practice, well-defined organizational values are crucial. And they're crucial for creating a thriving digital culture. And here's a few reasons why. Values drive community. If we want our employees to act like one, we need a shared code of behavior. Our values define our org beliefs and bring people together, essentially building a community in the office that we can then go and impact our community or our community outside of the office further. Values also attract the right people. People don't really leave companies, they leave toxic workplace cultures. Our core values define what we stand for and will help attract the talent that is right for our organizations as well. The talent that fits that culture that we're creating. As we know better than anywhere else in the charity sector, employees are willing to earn less money to work for a cause that's aligned with their personal values. They're even more likely to stay in an organization that has values and a culture that aligns with those values, those personal values as well. Values also simplify decision-making. It's easier to make choices when everyone knows what matters or what doesn't matter to an organization. Values help establish those clear priorities, and they make it easier to say no to the things that aren't aligned with core beliefs as well. Core values also educate audiences about who you are. When a charity brings its beliefs to life, their donors and service users also know what to expect or what not to expect when engaging with them as well. It sets a really strong precedence for who you are as an organization and what you stand by. And lastly, values create differentiation. They don't just represent what you believe, but your own unique behavior as well, and how you go about your business in your day-to-day, which we'll come on to in just a moment. Behavior is a big part of this, so we'll be jumping ahead to that in a bit. But first, here's a few tips to help you define effective organizational values. If you just pop on the next slide, please. Brilliant, thank you very much. So first benefit, first tip in sort of defining an effective organization is lead with your organizational values, is lead with your mission statement. As we kind of mentioned, your charity's mission defines the reason why your organization exists. It represents the impact you want to create in the sector and the community and all around the globe as well. You know, organizations that have compelling missions succeed in rallying people around a common cause. They tap into our human desire to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Your charity's values are the principles that support that mission and that feeling as well. You know, when designing your digital culture, you must remind people of the purpose and why that charity exists above all else. Think of it as, you know, if the mission addresses the why, you know, as we sort of mentioned before, these values exist to sort of express that how. How are we going to behave? How are we going to do what we stand by? How are we going to deliver on what we stand by? Second on the list is keep your values unique. You know, it's okay to analyze how other companies and organizations define their core values, and I actively encourage it as well. I believe that we should be looking to others. You know, you might even find some that inspire you to tweak yours. However, avoid the temptation of trying to act like somebody else, you know, trying to act like Google or Pixar or a World Wildlife Fund, for example. You know, as I said earlier, and the kind of backbone that runs through the webinar today is like our culture is unique to us. That's why it's, you know, the only true competitive advantage that we can have over another organization. We can copy quite easily what others are doing, but we can't behave like someone we're not. We can't behave like a charity or an organization or a company that we're not. But define values that are not only unique, but also meaningful. Choose the values that best capture how you want employees to behave. You know, avoid adopting values simply because they're cool, feel nice, or everyone else is using them. And embrace who you are above everything else, and let the values speak for your organization, yourself, and your charity. Next on the list is make values easy to understand. And remember, it's a simple one, and it's simple because it's to keep it simple. You know, if people can't understand or remember what we stand for as organizations, it'll be really hard for them to bring those values to life in everyday working habits as well. You know, there's a few good examples here. Slack uses emojis to make its core values more human and memorable. And the likes of Netflix have really 10, you know, really solid sort of almost commandment-like values as well. But you don't have to go that far. You know, you could do 5, 7, whatever sort of works and feels natural for your charity is best. Values must also challenge us as well. You know, a mission that doesn't challenge what we do as organizations is a mission that's not necessarily worth pursuing, right? The same applies to our values. They must force us to really think hard, make choices, and make difficult choices sometimes. The behaviors that our organizations say no to are just as important as the ones we say yes to. And we'll come on to understanding the behaviors that we don't want a little bit later on in the webinar. Now, true values are not just nice. They should also smart, you know, hurt a little bit from time to time. You know, if our values don't force us to make those tough calls, if they don't make us feel uncomfortable sometimes, then they're just nice to have, but not true core values that we can hold ourselves accountable against. And last but not least, make sure you're updating your values over time. You know, as our charities grow, as our organizations grow, our values need to evolve as well. You know, maybe some of the values defined early on don't really define how your people should behave today, or perhaps, you know, things in society have changed, and the words or beliefs need to be updated to reflect those changes. Really good example of that is Netflix have got a very open culture deck, which you previously didn't mention anything about inclusion or ethics. But when they updated it, the culture canvas a while back, inclusion and integrity became 2 of Netflix's 10 core values. You know, though values are defined by thinking of the long-term impact, you really do need to revisit them from time to time. Things change. You know, as strategies evolve, your culture evolves as well. You know, it never really hurts to regroup every quarter, every 6 months, and see whether the company's values need a refresh or some tweaks, or also just to see whether you're performing against them as well. You know, treat your culture like you would any sort of data or metric or OKR for that sense of KPI. You know, are you performing against your culture? Are the staff, employees, managers, leadership? Are you all actively living the culture that you've set? If not, things will need to change. And above all else, your values must mean something. They must inspire people and not just be self-serving. And as promised, Up next, and our next ingredient that goes into the mixing bowl of digital culture is behaviors. Cultural behaviors that support digital. Now, you've got your values in place. You can really start to drill down into the specific behaviors you want your digital culture to embody. Best place to start in something that I've come across that I really quite like is understanding the behaviors that you actually don't want to include, and evaluating the behaviors that might already exist in your organization that are actually holding your culture back. There's a really good book out there, and I'm boring everybody to death with it in a minute, that puts a brilliant spotlight on both those areas. Multi-year observation of team development and experience of coaching thousands of people and teams towards better performance inspired Patrick Lencioni to single out the 5 dysfunctions of a team. You can see the pyramid on the right-hand side on your screen here. They take a form of a pyramid that resembles Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're familiar with that. And just like those needs, Lencioni believes that you cannot resolve the issues of a higher level without attending to the lower level needs first. Each dysfunction has a direct impact on a team's performance, and hampers overall productivity. The good news with that is that with the right leadership and management skills, all of these dysfunctions can be overcome, and better still, used to promote the behaviors that we want to have in our organizations and promote the behaviors that can support our digital culture and ultimately drive our teams forward. So I thought we'd spend a little bit of time having a look at each, deep diving and understanding. So going from bottom to top. First on the list is a dysfunction of team number 1, which is lack of trust. Lack of trust actually is less about trusting each other and more about the fear to be vulnerable with each other in teams and organizations. By protecting our sense of invulnerability, individuals and team members don't let the team develop, engage in meaningful work conflict, and overall reach better outcomes. Generally, teams that lack trust tend to conceal weaknesses and mistakes from each other. They don't ask for help. They don't ask for advice. They hesitate to offer assistance when something's outside of their own area of responsibility. And they hesitate to offer feedback or compliment skills. They hate meetings and tend to avoid spending time together as well. The good thing, as I said, is there's ways and means to overcome this dysfunction. And the key bit is by helping teams focus on strengths rather than weaknesses in other members and in themselves as well. Knowledge of our strengths helps to build that confidence that we need, and will help free employees from the fear to show their weaknesses. That discussion of individual strengths will also inspire team members to recognize and appreciate the skills of their teammates, and also offer assistance related to what they're good at as well. Being able to brow that hill and create that trust in your organization will allow us as teams to feel comfortable working together towards a common goal, will allow teams to quickly react to issues that are no longer silenced and address challenges head on, and prevent mistakes by giving timely feedback and assistance to each other, and motivate each other, appreciating other skills and strengths as well. You get that true peer-to-peer accountability in there as well. Our second dysfunction of a team is fear of conflict. Now, we all know that workplace diversity contributes to better results, but it also presupposes that people will have a different or even opposing ideas about their work, a huge benefit of having that diverse work environment. You won't be able to benefit from that diversity if the opposing ideas are held back due to a fear of conflict and a fear of challenge. Teams that fear conflict are generally seen as being hesitant to voice opinions and concerns. They ignore controversial topics, even if they have the potential to determine, to be successful and determine the team or organization's success. They have more interpersonal conflicts and personal attacks, and have more of those back channel communication and politics instead of a collective voice. There's a really good test actually that will help you determine if you have this type of dysfunction going on in your team at the minute, or to help you see if you get it as you go through your digital culture. And the test is by suggesting an obviously bad idea on a team meeting. If the team accepts the idea without any attempt to discuss or oppose it, there's a problem to resolve. A good way to resolve it is by assigning devil's advocates on the meeting. Let one person find faults with any suggestion that is voiced, and encourage other members to defend their point of view. Write down the pros and cons and help your team, your organization see the full picture. This will help show the organization that, you know, voicing opposing ideas is good for the project. You know, it will also project culture, strategy, anything that you're doing, idea. It will also train the team to find faults with ideas, not people that voice them as well. You can also use the general understanding of the team's strength mentioned previously to determine how each member approaches conflict, and coach the team and the individuals within it on how to debate with one another based on unique strengths of the members. You know, overcoming the fear of conflict in your team will create a culture that leverages diversity, you know, and exploits the ideas of everyone on the team, not push them down. You know, you should be able to quickly resolve problems. Excuse me, you should be able to openly discuss critical topics and concerns, minimize the politics, and overall get ahead of challenges, if not as they're happening, but even before they're happening. The third level of a dysfunction is the lack of commitment. You know, if your organization avoids open discussion of controversial topics and doesn't clearly understand why this or that decision has been taken, they'll often fail to commit to the adopted course of action, or could be even sort of strategic goals overall. You know, we see teams that lack commitment often display that lack of confidence or in fear of failure more generally. You know, they discuss the same topics or decisions over and over again. You know, make ambiguity and second guessing the norm and make it thrive. And generally fail to seize opportunities. You know, spending way too much time on the decision-making process itself. You know, something that, you know, we like to be agile. We talk about agile when we talk to digital. So you see how that can hinder a digital culture. There's several strategies that might help you overcome this. You know, first, make it a rule to summarize all key decisions made during a meeting, and the rationale for taking them. If a meeting is with the managing staff, clarify what should and should not be communicated to the larger team as well. You can also facilitate the commitment by encouraging the team to discuss possible pitfalls, worst case scenarios. But again, clarity is the key here. You know, clarity is the basis for commitment. Define clear deadlines, not only for actions, but for the decisions themselves, and try to stick to them as best as possible. This way, team members will assume responsibility to arrive at the best decision possible and commit to it, rather than just postpone the solution. Essentially, what you want here is you know, people need to champion the changes and decisions they are a part of. And again, if we're not finding that, then there's a problem needed to be solved there. Overcoming a lack of commitment creates a culture that can really clearly understand the work directions and priorities. They share common goals and objectives. They feel ready to change and are empowered by it. And they don't let fear of a mistake prevent them from moving forward, which allows you to move quickly, agile, and in the digital way we all like to as well. Excuse me, I'm just gonna have a quick sip of water. And moving on to dysfunction number 4, which is avoidance of accountability. So people are used to emphasize personal, people are used, sorry, I'll start that one again. People are used to emphasize and personal responsibility for our actions. It was a tongue twister, that wasn't a tongue twister. This is why individuals do not like to interfere with what other team members do or don't do. Still, this is counterproductive as a team culture, where the common result depends on members' ability to hold each other accountable for personal decisions and actions. Now, we see orgs that avoid accountability generally make high performers discouraged. They miss a lot of deadlines, make mistakes. They make team leaders overwhelmed as a source of discipline and the source of you know, work pickup and other things. And they generally remain mediocre. They don't push and achieve things that they have the potential to achieve. You know, it's to resolve this dysfunction, you need to hold regular progress reviews and reward team achievements rather than individual achievements. You know, make it clear for individuals that hold high standards of performance as their strength, that holding others accountable will be appreciated and rewarded. If the team has successfully overcome the fear of conflict, they'll be ready to tackle this dysfunction too. You know, when your team learns to hold each other accountable, they'll quickly identify potential problems, you know, question each other's actions and approaches, and generally hold each other accountable as well. You know, they'll respect their team and the organization for applying the same standards to everyone, and they'll avoid excessive management of performance, fines, and corrective actions. also pressure performance to improve as well. You'll have that set level of expectations that everyone should be working towards. I always say, yeah, it's good to be friends with the people you work with, but that should never overcome the sort of the accountability and needs of the organization as well. The good thing about being pally with who you work with is the ability to keep each other accountable as well. And the very top of our dysfunction pyramid is inattention to results. This dysfunction of a team stems from the individual's focus on their own achievements or status at the expense of collective results. Such focus can make team members do something that is not promoting collective goals just to get individual recognition or enhance their ego, essentially. Teams that are not focused on collective results lose achievement-oriented team members. They get distracted from collective goals easily. They fail to develop, and they generally lose market competition as well. And I've definitely had a few jobs in the past that have suffered from this dysfunction. For your team to keep, to resolve this, you need your team to keep focused on common results. It's vital to have clear metrics to assess results. If the team already knows how to keep each other accountable, they'll push each other toward pursuing common and not individual goals. As in the case with the avoidance of accountability, reward should be based on team rather than individual results and achievements. If the urge to get individual recognition or please one's ego is part of a team member's personality, it's not necessary to fight or punish it. Instead, use the strength-based approach and make sure individuals' sort of zeal align with their common goals as well. And once you make your team results focus, what you'll find is it will really minimize that individualistic behavior. It'll avoid arising distractions. You'll create a culture and environment that enjoys development and enjoys success as well. And just to caveat all of that before we move on, it's really important to remember that great teams and cultures, are not born. They don't happen. They don't just turn up. They're made. It's up to leaders and organizations to recognize what's preventing our teams from pursuing and achieving these goals and common results, and building a culture that promotes the desired behaviors based on the values that creative, and overall supports what we're trying to do as organizations, what we're trying to do as charities, what our missions is, essentially. And with that, we'll move on to the final ingredient, which is defining, taking those behaviors and defining working principles. As with everything I've mentioned in this webinar, these are totally unique to your organization. But the way you work can be additionally unique given the layers of the way your sort of working principles work are actually additionally unique, given the layers of previously unique steps that you've had to take to get to this point. Having understood the behaviors you don't want your organization to exhibit, or you want to stop your organization exhibiting, defining these ways of working allows you to reverse those dysfunctional elements of your team or stop them from ever happening in the first place. Essentially, what you wanted to do by defining working principles is to identify all of the great things that we love about working in the teams, as well as acknowledging the things that we don't, and then come away with a team promise or a manifesto of sorts. And you can use that manifesto to hold ourselves accountable to as well. And that also helps us keep us honest against the culture that we've created collectively. There's no real right or wrong way to define your manifesto, but a way that keeps it sort of people first, which is another the salt and pepper of this webinar, is to run a ways of working workshop. And I've shared a few tips of how you can run one of these workshops as well. So you start off by making sure you allocate at least half a day, plenty of time, or a whole day for the with the whole team. Book a large meeting room, get a whiteboard, don't forget the markers, don't forget the eraser, get the drinks and snacks in as well. Or in this day and age, you can get a snazzy Zoom background and treat the team to a Deliveroo if you feel so inclined. Then it's all about making time and getting focused. Important to remove as many distractions as possible. Get the phones off. Unless you're on the laptop, get the laptops off the desk, so on. Just be present and focused on what you're going to be doing. Then it's about setting the scene. When getting everyone together, it's essential to be clear regarding what the session is about and what you're expecting to get out of it as well. In this instant, it's to gain a collective understanding of what makes great teams based on the experiences, the values, the behaviors, and get a draft team manifesto created as well that you can refer back to, so you can start to hold yourselves accountable to those behaviors and values that you've created. If it may be one of the first times that the team has come together, you can also chuck in a nice little icebreaker. That often a really good start and gets you off the ground as well, to make people all feel a little bit comfortable. Next, it's good to start a bit of a retrospective. So hold an open discussion around, what people have enjoyed and disliked when working in the team. Ask the team if they're happy to shout things out, write on post-it notes, discuss it after, or generally keep it a bit anonymous as well. Remember to be led by the room though. We don't want to be driving the meetings as leaders. You want the room to drive it. You're just there as a facilitator. Let people have their say and listen to them as well. And then you can move on to the future perspective once you have that common understanding of the experiences that people have. And then it's time to discuss how you want to carry those forward. Take the experiences and what you know about the behaviors, what the attitudes you want to have, and the values that you've already defined as well. And you can put that all together as you consider what is a future goal and an aspirational way of working. It takes a long time. It takes time to form bonds with it in teams, and for teams to appreciate and build trust in each other. It takes so long to build them up, and it takes so little to knock them down. Having this manifesto, this set of promises, can really help us stick to the behaviors that that can get us through something we haven't really touched onto. Sorry, I've gone ahead of myself. So having that set of promises on a manifesto can really help us stick to those identified behaviors. And it can really help you get through those stages of a team that we haven't really touched too much on today, which is, the forming, storming, norming, and performing areas as well. And then the very last step of a workshop is, creating the manifesto itself. And so if you don't mind just clicking on to the next slide, I have an example manifesto, or example pieces of a manifesto there. This is taken just from something I found on the internet, which gives you an example of a tech company's manifesto and what they created off the back of a ways of working principle. Now, at the end of this session, at the end of the workshop, you should have a clearly defined set of statements, which the team has all agreed and signed up to. Capture these, save them. These are the things you want to print out, and these are the things you want to have visible, and these are the things you want to hold people accountable against. You should be running the retrospectives regularly after you've done the workshop. Check yourselves against this. Like, are we keeping to our own standards that we set for ourselves? Manifesto are not commandments, essentially. They're owned and created by the team. The buy-in should be there, and you as a team can evolve them as it matures as well. As the team matures, as new members join, and as the team looks to continually improve. So I'll let you drink those in for a few minutes, for a few seconds, sorry, because that is all I have for today, actually. So if you just want to click on. Yep. These five ingredients should really help you form the digital culture you want for your organization. But remember, as with any good digital strategy, transformation, or project, culture needs to be evaluated regularly, as I've said. Make sure you're checking in on it quarterly, 6 monthly, treat it like your OKRs, treat it like your KPIs, action what's needed, and change what's needed as well. Make sure you grow with it. Make sure your culture grows with you, grows with your strategy, and you're constantly evaluating and looking at it. And that is all from me for today. Thanks very much for your time. Any questions?
Yeah, this is where we're going to have to do a bit of a mute and unmute, isn't it? But thank you so much for that session, Chris. I'm sure a lot of people found it really interesting, and I'm sure maybe even some of that triangle kind of resonated with some people who have joined today. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are. But we did get some questions through. I actually really liked this question from an anonymous attendee. All this talk of food has made me hungry. Yes, you're not alone with that one. But how can you build trust with a team when trust has been badly damaged?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And you've got to go back to the beginning. Essentially, you've got to try and understand where the trust is being damaged, and rebuild. Essentially, lots of, as I said in the in the presentation there, it can take years to build trust. It can take minutes for trust to be broken. And as leaders, it's sometimes really hard to understand where that trust is being broken. And really get to the nuances on it, because if the team and stuff are, there's all those dysfunctions in the way, it's hard to get to the nuts and bolts of it and really get to the core. So go back to the beginning, go back to your values, start almost rebuild the culture. It's generally a clear sign that the culture you have isn't working. So it's a good time to sort of reevaluate and start again, would be my advice there. Then create a culture with the team buy-in, start to rebuild trust again, essentially.
Great, thank you. So yeah, going on mute, it's scrambling for mute. So we have another Chris in the virtual room, Chris Harrison. So he says, hi Chris, any tips on how to keep the values in the thoughts of our staff team from top to bottom, so kind of present there for everybody to remember and think about?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think the best way to do that is make sure you're reviewing them regularly. This is one thing we're hoping to do going forward here as an organization. We're like many charities out there, still on the learning curve as well when it comes to digital and digital culture. But one thing we'll be doing going forward is making sure we're reviewing quarterly. Me with my team specifically, we're going to be building culture, our working principles, our values into our almost OKR valuation. So looking at them as an OKR and understand how we're performing against our own culture. And that'll give you a good idea of whether you're on track, what needs to be changed, what do you need to be doing to help people gain that trust, as we've kind of just been talking about. How can we make sure that we're all clear and all singing from the same song sheet, essentially? So I think that's a case of, having sessions that actively talk about culture and actively talk about values and behaviors that you want and expect from teams as you go. It's like anything, right? Out of sight, out of mind. So yeah, making sure that they're as important as as your data and as your performances, essentially, because it's such a big contributing factor to performance of organizations that that's how it should be treated.
Great, thank you. And I'll ask you to put yourself on mute again. So for those who might have joined me, we are in the same room. That's why we're having to sort of dance between the mute buttons. But yes, thank you for that, Chris. So we have another question from Rebecca, who said, so far I'm not quite clear on what it is about this that makes it about digital culture. And it all sounds really kind of clear in terms of making sure that you get that healthy organizational culture. But Rebecca's wondering where perhaps the digital aspect of it is, and how is that being created?
Yeah, and that's where the unique individual element comes into it. I think all the behaviors and values that you create have to serve the digital sort of transformation project that you're going through, which is where that unique element slips in. If you want, you want to work in an agile way, you'll have to create values and behaviors and working principles that support that. If you want to think digital first throughout your organization at the same time, very similar sort of thing. You'll have to create values, principles, and behaviors that support that as well. So to your point, that it is sort of a sense that it's, all organizations, whether digital or not, should be doing this. But I think from our point of view, all organizations should be digital as well. So it's about looking at it holistically and how these can be molded into unique values, unique behaviors, and unique working principles that supports your digital transformation, essentially. So yeah, I hope that helped.
Great, thank you. So you're gonna have to put yourself.
Sorry.
You get carried away with the question and you forget to put yourself on mute. So no, I think that's a good answer for that one. Thank you. And perhaps maybe this one sort of joins quite well with it, which is, how can you persuade the management and the board of an 80-person charity that is really resistant to digital? We're still getting strategic plans that don't mention digital anywhere and talk about ICT.
Yeah, that's a big question, and I'm trying my very best to answer it. So I'm just going to read it again, so just so I can make sure I capture it. How can we persuade the management and the board of an 80-person charity that is really resisted to digital? We're still getting strategic plans that don't mention digital anywhere and talk about ICT. Yeah, that's a it's more of a strategic question. I think there's a culture element in there, but that seems like a more of a holistic organizational struggle that you've got there. I guess first and foremost, yeah, it's a bit chicken and egg in terms of going and building a digital strategy. I think what I'm going to sort of go back to here is this communication element of the presentation. You know, if you know, what one sort of thing I always think about, if something's not landing with potential stakeholders, it's probably on the way we're communicating it. So it's finding a way to communicate what your needs and what you want to do effectively, why digital is important, you know, talking the language that your board likes to be talked to, you know, whether it's data, whether it's ROI, whether it's engagement, whether it's hard metrics and cost and finance. That might help you get a little bit of a breakthrough. You know, coming together, it sounds like it's a big charity, coming together as general leadership within the charity to have a collective voice there first before you go back to the board will also help. You know, strengthen numbers, power in numbers, that sort of thing. But I think what helps is having a good solid plan of what you want to do, the why behind it, and the benefits that's going to create for the organization. Taking that to the board in a way that speaks their language will also help them get on board, and that should get you over the first hurdle, hopefully. The way I always sort of explain this is, you know, make it hard for them to say no to anything that you're asking. We talked about this in our digital strategy webinar, that how to create the perfect digital strategy. If you head back to Monday, I'm going to shameless plug this and the digital strategy. It's in the bonus content. So I'd highly recommend listen to that webinar as well that I did, and we talked how you can get specific buy-in for board for your digital strategy, and then spend a bit of time on that. But yeah, all about making it hard for your boards to say no to your ask, and what you need to do to be able to do that, but communicating on their level and how they like to be communicated to, putting it in a way that makes it really difficult for them to say no, to really easy for them to understand, will help you hopefully get where you need to be. And we've also got loads of other resources on getting board buy-in as well, which we'll send out after this. As part of they're part of this week as well.
Great, thank you so much for that. So we have a question from an anonymous attendee. How can you judge where conflict is fair and where it might not be fair? So I guess maybe in that example, perhaps, you know, when it, you know, maybe is it fair if there is actually an issue going on that is causing problems for team members? Yeah, I suppose if you could give us a bit more information.
Yes, so I think the conflict we're alluding to in the deck was more on challenge-based stuff. So, you know, fear of failure and fear of being told off for doing something wrong, essentially, which is not what we want to create. Environments in our culture that don't empower that sense of failure, that sense of, you know, fear of having an idea challenged, because, you know, we need that in organizations. So that is one sense of conflict which I would say is fair. You know, that's totally different to a grievance, you know, a grievance where somebody's wronged someone, and I think those two should be separate. Even for the fair sense of conflict, you know, your working principles that you decide, and a couple of one there, you know, there's a way to feedback ideas and challenge ideas that isn't you know, disrespectful, or isn't sort of shutting anybody down. You still need to still need to make people feel, not peel people, make people feel valued and that they've got a voice, and everybody should feel comfortable raising ideas, because again, that doesn't bode well for your culture if you can't do that as well. You need to find that balance. So again, it comes to your working principles and your behaviors. So, you know, you want those positive behaviors of bringing up ideas and challenging ideas, but there's a way to challenge an idea. You know, like, that's not very good isn't the way to challenge an idea. Understanding it, thinking about it, talking, asking questions, and building on it. That's a different way to challenge an idea. And say, actually, where if you do this, this might happen instead. Or okay, and write the pros and cons down, understand them. That's totally different if something is, saying that's not very good isn't fair conflict. Challenging it in the right way and understand. I think in the same rate, sort of just being a bad person at work isn't very good, and and sort of being nasty to teammates and not very nice and being disrespectful, and all that sort of stuff. So that's the line for me, but it can be very much determined by the working principles that you build from your behaviors.
Great, thank you. So we do have one last question. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to pop them in now before we all go. But Emma has asked, what's the difference between company values and a manifesto? I have worked somewhere where the values were constantly promoted and shouted about, but the majority of staff were miserable. The values were so vague, they could be interpreted so widely. I think that's a really good question, Emma.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Very good question. And it's a great example of, something where the values need to be updated clearly, because it's not a people-led culture in that sense. It's not a people-led digital culture where the values are made at top level, but not necessarily adhered to throughout the rest of the organization. Essentially, the word manifesto I used was just terminology. You could call it anything else you want to. It could be, commandments list, that sort of thing. But the journey from values to manifesto, I would think of the manifesto in this scenario as working principles. So the values are what your mission adheres to. It should be built upon your mission, and what you as an organization would be very comfortable internally and externally sharing is, this is who we are, this is what we stand by, this is what we are as an organization. The behaviors are the next level. So the behaviors are the positive aspects of how you embody your values, basically how you live them day to day. And then the working principles take that one step. So what do you do to keep those behaviors on track, to make sure you're adhering to the behaviors? And that's where the manifesto, I think that last one, that's the bit that needs to be on the wall. I think I said in the presentation, you can stick your values everywhere, but if you're not living them, it doesn't matter. It's the working principles that help you live by the behaviors that help you live by the values. It's the working principles and how you operate. Your values don't tell you how you work. They don't tell you how to work and how to sort of live by the values. They don't tell you how to put them in practice. It's the working principles built on the behaviors that come from the values that tell you how to work in practice. So that's the doc that goes everywhere, not the values. The values, again, the working principles manifesto doc is the doc that keeps you true to your values. So that's the key difference between them. And I think that's what adds clarity. Again, the behaviors, the going through the various steps is what adds the clarity, what give people, the manifesto could be slightly different for teams within your organization, because you all do things a little bit differently, and that's okay. But as long as it's got that structure through the middle of it, those core values and those same behaviors, you'll all be striving for that sort of common goal.
Great, thank you. Well, I think that was the last question. So thank you so much for that, Chris. Very insightful session. And I'm sure a lot of people will be able to sort of bring some things back with them to their own organisations. So thank you so much, guys, for joining the first live webinar of our Digital Transformation Week. I hope you've been enjoying it so far. Please do sort of join us for tomorrow morning's webinar as well for our Digital Fundraising Day. That will be very interesting, I'm sure. And if you also, it seems to be a tradition every time we seem to have some sort of event, someone takes a terrible screenshot of Chris throughout his webinar and then posts it on Twitter. But if you do that, make sure that you, hashtag us, hashtag DTW2022, and we'd love to see Chris's face pop up. But that's all for now, and have a lovely week and speak to you soon. Bye.